Hi.
Hi. Hi. Okay. We're learning something about me. I'm so excited to get to talk. Okay, so let's start. You tell people, even though everyone on planet Earth knows who you are, tell them in 2 sentences in case they have arrived from someplace else.
Amazing. I'm Dr. Becky. I'm a clinical psychologist. I'm a mom of three. My kids are 10, 7, and 5. And I really am on a mission to rethink the way we raise our kids and kind of the way we end up raising ourselves along the way.
Amazing. And I'm Emily Oster. I'm a professor of economics. I have 2 kids. Mine are 11 and 7. And I do data and parenting. And I don't know. I'm also on a mission to help parents be more relaxed and use data. I think that's the tagline. So we're going to talk about. I don't know. We have so many things. We had a pre-discussion, which we decided we could do live for 7 hours. So I hope people are ready. I definitely want to talk about your book, but I think we wanted to sort of start by talking a little bit about anxiety, because I think both of us talk a lot to people who sort of think about how to manage anxiety as a parent. So I would love to just sort of like when I say the word anxiety, what do you think of that is? What is that?
Yeah. Okay. I can answer this question in so many ways. So I'm going to answer it in just a few, though. So number one, when I think about all the years of my private practice, probably the number one kind of presenting thing people would come in with is they would say, I'm anxious, I have anxiety. And I'd always say back to them, and I meant this respectfully, I actually don't really know what that means, right? Because anxiety can mean so many things for different people. But what I think is an overarching experience of anxiety, which is just a useful way to think about it, is it's kind of the experience of not wanting to be in your body. I don't even know if it's a feeling as much as it's a not wanting to feel whatever I'm feeling right now, right? And so I think that's my lived experience of it. And then I also tend to think about it as an equation, which I just think is helpful because it kind of, and I'll explain why. I think we feel anxiety when we have something unknown about the future, coupled with our underestimation of our ability to cope. And so there's something unknown, so something we're looking forward to or we're worried about in the future. We don't obviously know what it is yet. And then whenever we feel anxious, we tend to really underestimate our coping, right? And we forget if this anxiety ever turns into an actual problem, which it might and it might not, right? Some worries convert to problems. Some worries, as we know, they were just a lot of worry and we ended up being fine. And the reason we end up being fine is even when the thing comes, we actually are so much more capable in coping than we give ourselves credit for.
No, I think that's yeah. I love that. I love that frame. I talk a lot about anxiety with my kids, actually, because I think in particular my older one, I think is a little more like me, and we sort of talk a lot about kind of facing the almost just working through what am I really worried about, and what is this beyond the feeling, what is really sort of behind the feeling, how much is just the feeling, and then the sort of the feeling, it is the sort of the whole kind of becomes the whole thing.
Yeah. And I think that's where, and obviously, I mean, you and I, we love coming together, I think, for this reason. There's a way in which I think your specialty and my specialty can come together in the most amazing way for parents. And then there's ways where each of us alone can miss something. So for example, if you think about anxiety as okay, so there's something unknown about the future, and then there's how I think about my coping skills. Okay, well, sometimes we're anxious about things, and I would tell someone go to Emily, find one of her books, go get the data, get the information.
Yeah.
You're gonna get the information. There's still something uncertain probably, but you feel better knowing more, right?
Yeah.
Now, the opposite can also be true, I find, especially for those of us like me who are information gathering people and like to know, because at the end of the day, you can never make the future certain. There's always some amount of uncertainty. Right. And at a certain point, the searching for more information only increases our anxiety because you're trying to solve for something you can never solve. And when that happens, I think with kids and adults, we have to notice whoa, I'm going down this Google rabbit hole, or at the end of the day, I can't know this. You know what I can tell myself? I'm someone who's been through hard things before, and I will get through this hard thing. And when our body hears us remind ourselves wait, I'm someone who can cope, it no longer needs to look for the information that's no longer available because it's in touch with like its own capability.
I love that. I think I think you're sort of absolutely right on the kind of the way that data, like I spend a lot of time telling people data can be relaxing, data can be relaxing, and I think it often can. But I do think that we sometimes sort of get to a point where we're like looking for the data almost to sort of tell us certainty. And this, I mean, of course, came up all the time during the pandemic. You like can get all the data you want, but like there is no certainty. And there is no, we cannot be sure about any of the choices. That's still true in parenting. So, my kid says, I'm nervous about going to school. I cannot say like, well, nothing bad will happen. Like definitely everyone will be nice to you. And, like, I can't provide you certainty. We can get the information, we can do things, but like, we can't get the certainty. And I think that's almost a challenge. It's like almost a big challenge of parenting, right? Is to like live with the uncertainty and somehow move forward.
Yeah, I think there is this duality with kids, and it is something I think that's woven into my book, like this combination of, hey, let's think about what your first day of school is going to be like, right? You want to fill the day for them. Like, oh, I wonder if they'll have blocks in your classroom. I wonder if you'll be with your best friend. Let's say you didn't get the class list. So that wondering, or even saying, here's your teachers. You should know their names. Let's start talking about them. But also what kids need to hear is like, look, at the end of the day, there's going to be things we don't predict too. And I don't know exactly what those things are going to be, but here's something I know about you. You're a kid who's dealt with a lot of tricky things, and you're a kid who's going to be able to get through that. And even if there's something so tricky, here's what I know for sure. I'll be there to pick you up, or I'll be there when you get home, and we'll talk about it. And I just know we're going to get through it together. Like, that's actually the ultimate thing we can give our kids, is the gift of like, I don't know. And what I do know is I'll be here for you.
Yeah. I mean, that is like so important. I love like, so there's so much of this stuff in your book. And I love that this sort of like almost the scripting piece of it, but even just this importance. Yes. I know I have it too. I can hide it. And this sort of scripting of I'm going to be there. In fact, we see some of that in data when we look at sort of resilience to, say, bullying, that having the family foundation and being happy at home is something not that prevents your kid from being bullied, because that's something you can't necessarily do, but it is the thing that allows the kid to move from there and not have that be something that sort of disrupts their life in the longer run. So I think this sort of, somebody asked a question I really liked in the question things, which I'm going to ask you, which is, how much should you show your own anxiety to your kids? Not like put it on them, but like how much is it a good idea to explain if you, let's say you are a person with some anxiety?
Yeah. I mean,
how much should you talk about that?
I am a person with lots of anxiety. I am so good at the anxiety. I do anxiety I'm very advanced in anxiety. So what I think about that question, right, is I actually think if everyone here is going to take one thing from what I say, please take many things from Emily, because she'll have many smarter things to say, but take this one thing from me, okay? So I find that one of the most powerful things we can do is notice the questions we're asking ourselves, and just notice if that question makes us feel more anxious. For example, how much anxiety should I show my kid? Like, for me, that question, I'm like, oh, am I showing, like, immediately I just go, am I showing too much? Like, is there a number? Like, what? And like, that question makes me anxious. So this is what I do when that happens. I'm like, I'm going to upgrade my question. That's just, I don't want to even answer that question. I'm going to, the paths we go down in our life are really determined by the questions we ask. And so like finding yourself able to stop and to say, is there a different version of this question that makes me feel empowered? I promise is way more important than any strategy or solution you have, because it's going to determine the strategy or solution. So better than how much anxiety should I show my kid, what I would say is, what do I know about myself? When do I feel anxious? When am I triggered? How does my anxiety come out? Does it come out as like I go alone because I'm having a panic attack and I go into a room? Does it come out as I can get like, for me, I get controlling when I get anxious, because it's like, if I can control my kids or my husband or something, instead of even saying like, I'm kind of nervous we're going to be late if we don't leave soon, I'd go to my husband and I'm going to say like, I can't believe you haven't showered yet. And then obviously he finds that annoying, right? So what I would say is, when do you get anxious? Know that about yourself. Give yourself permission to have it. And then how can you own your own emotions? So like, you just explain to your kid what's happening. Like, if I hear those questions, I'm like, oh, I still feel like a good person. I actually have something I can do versus how much anxiety should I show my kids? If someone says like, I don't know, you should show them 4 out of 10, whatever that means. What if I'm like, oh no, I do 6 out of 10? Like, it's just, it's like, it's not going to make me feel good. Right. So that's what I would say in terms of how to talk about it with your kids. I think this is a big idea woven throughout the book, is that information is not scary to kids. What is very scary to kids is noticing changes around them and having that coupled with the lack of information. And kids actually are wired to notice more things in their environment than we are, because that's how they achieve safety, because they're so helpless. So any animal that's helpless has to be extra hyper vigilant. So they're going to notice mommy's, whatever it is, mommy's like looking very, very nervous. Mommy's asking many, many more questions. So how do we own it? I would own it in advance, actually, if you know what's going to happen. Hey, just want to let you know, we're in traffic. Usually when I'm in traffic for more than a couple minutes, I get really, really nervous. And so if I start getting frustrated, just know that's a me thing, not a you thing. And I just wanted to make sure you knew that. Like, okay, like not a problem at all. Where kids really struggle is when parents are clearly having big emotions and then they're just left alone, because what kids do when they're alone is they doubt their perception and then they self for what they see. It must be my fault. And that's really what we want to avoid.
Yeah, I love that. I've actually found that using my kids like to help each other on this is sometimes like helpful. My daughter has gotten used to the idea that I also don't like traffic, and the other, over the holiday weekend we spent 3 hours sitting still on I-95 because it was like a flooding issue. And initially I was like very, very upset. And I totally freaked out my son. And basically he was just like, we're going to die in this car. He's just like my 7-year-old. My daughter was just like, mom is like this. Like, everything is going to be fine. This is just like, mom, this is how mom reacts to this. Like, let's just watch TV. And like, eventually she'll calm down. And so, maybe I prepared her better than him. But I like that. Yeah, I like that frame quite a lot. Okay, so I want to talk about this book, and I think I want to one question I'm sure that many people who are watching this will ask is like, how is this different from your Instagram content? What is new in the book?
I love that question. I am like a deep skeptic, and like I've bought books from various people in the past where I'm like, I've read this from you before, I've seen this, and like, and so I just like, I think the thing about the book that is like the true story behind the book is that right away when I launched an Instagram account, which was like 2.5 years ago, there were people who were like, oh, will you write a book, right? Like, you obviously put out a lot of content. And I remember thinking then, like, I don't have a book in me. Like, I have thoughts, I put them on Instagram. But then after about a year, I was like, oh, there's actually such a bigger arc of a story I want to tell. Like, everything I write about or think about comes from like these principles. And like, I want to be able to share these big ideas with people, because that framework is going to be more important than a script in their life. But then I'm practical too. And I'm like, but then I want to go through the problems that people usually come to me for in my private practice: tantrums, shyness, sibling rivalry, rudeness, the whole thing. And I was like, well, then after I lay out those principles, I want to like kind of go through each behavior and say, here's what I think's going on, and here's my favorite strategies and scripts for that situation. So I think the first section can really be thought of as like, it's really the only place I've ever laid out my whole approach, because I can't do that on social media or in a podcast. And then after that, the chapters are like, they're not meant to be read sequentially, because like, I really promise you every chapter is going to happen over the course of parenting, not all at once, hopefully for you. But like, it's a great time to be like, oh, lying is now happening. Cool. Let me look to the lying chapter. And it's going to feel though like a continuation of every one of those early principles. And that's really almost my pitch to parents. Like, when people are like, is this good for 1-year-olds? Is this good for 18-year-olds? I was like, here's my promise. Like, you learn this, it's as applicable to when your kid is 1 to when your kids are going to be 40. It's like, yeah, you might need a little tweak, but it's the same principles can really be applied for any age. And that's what I do in those later chapters for the specific behaviors.
Yeah, and I think what I think is really like fantastic here is, in so many of the things you're talking about, I mean, I come into this from data, right? I like data. And I think when I think about pregnancy and sort of little kid parenting, there's actually quite a lot of data that's really, really helpful in sort of making decisions and thinking about what to do. As we get into older parenting, like, we're in a bit of a data desert. And questions like how do I address sibling rivalry? Like how do I think about lying? It's not so much that there's a right way, or I mean there are better ways and there are worse ways, but there's not like an answer. What you need is an approach, right? It's like you need like just a way that works for you to kind of approach the situation. And I think that's a kind of, I don't know, there's like a lot of extremely helpful stuff around just these details about like how do you like sibling stuff about like fair, as my sister-in-law sometimes says to me, fair is not always equal, right? I mean, this like just so much temptation to be fair and
Yeah.
like cut the bacon. I mean, one time I weighed bacon. I
Right.
weighed a piece of bacon. Like my kids, there was like, for fairness, I weighed the two halves of the bacon, and like, so that's not what I'm supposed to be doing.
Well,
I don't think.
that's the thing, and this is like, like I have my PhD, right? I went to a research-based program. I have the utmost respect in science and data. And here's a piece of data that's not the same as empirical data, but that like I feel like we don't prioritize enough as parents. Is like, I'm splitting bacon and weighing it. Like, let me just check it. Like the data in my body, like, is that working for me? Like, is that working for me? I really think that like going forward, I want my kids to learn a model where like they're with their friends and like they each get a sandwich and they're like, you're bigger than my bread. So actually what I've learned over the years is like, you need to give me corner.
That's what I want.
I'm sorry, I don't want my kids to do that. Like, I don't think so. That like, I just want like, and there's a lot of people here on this live, and let me just say right up front, like you came here on a Friday where I am in New York City. It's like the most beautiful day. You could be doing a lot of things with your time. You're listening to, me and Emily, like right here. So it says so much about you. And like, just to say to yourself right now, like, I know a lot of things. And like, I have data inside me too that like, at least I can be curious about. Like, oh, it does. Shouldn't do it. No, it doesn't have to be a one-to-one relationship, but just to take what your body is telling you with a type of respect, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's like one of the most important things I think in parenting.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think, sometimes there's this sense when I sort of talk to people about data that like your gut, like that is sort of has to be in conflict with your gut. Like, and that's not right. Like making good parenting choices is about thinking about the evidence of the world, but then it's also about thinking about what works for you, and whether you call that gut or you call it preferences or you call it, your personal data. It is actually like a sort of super key part of almost all of these decisions, particularly the kind of like family, yeah, when you're getting into it with your kids, as we do. So what is one thing you learned writing the book? I think sometimes we write books, we're sort of writing down stuff we like already know, right? I mean, you do a lot of this stuff, but what is like the best thing you learned, or one thing or something?
One thing is like something like about the material in the book, and something is like almost something bigger. So I'll start with something that I wrote about in the book about the topic of confidence, because this is really one of my favorite things. And as I was writing the book, I was also like seeing people in my private practice, and like I'll never forget these back-to-back sessions I had, right? So everyone just like enter into this with me. So one session was with parents who were seeing me about their kid who was, very like a lot of shyness and hesitation. And the way they started the session was like we came to see you because we feel like it's like much more extreme than other kids. Like we went to this, get together. My kid knows every kid there. And like, they've even been to that gymnastics place. They know the counselors. And everyone's like, come join us. My kid was the only kid who was like clinging to me. Like, and then the line was, I wish my kid could be more confident. Okay. That was the line. So we worked through it. Okay. The very next session, I had parents of a 16-year-old come who basically told me this story. My kid got suspended from school, and that's like a big deal at age 16. And my kid was involved in this like text message situation, a group text, nasty things were said. My kid didn't say the things, but my kid also like just went along with it. And literally they go, why can't my kid differentiate from the crowd and be more confident? Okay. And I was like, there is some like massive lesson here. When our kids are younger, we worry about our kids who see what other kids are doing and kind of say, no, not for me. And when our kids are 16, we hope that they have the ability to see what other kids are doing and say, like, no, not for me. And I was like, wow, that is really fascinating. And it made me really just think about what confidence is, and like how confidence is not like feeling good. Confidence is not like going along with something or trying something new. I think confidence is really self-trust. It's the ability to trust your own feelings. And so in a way, a kid who's not joining a birthday party, when they see every other kid they know joining, like, why don't we say that kid is confident? We're like, wow, you literally have so much peer pressure around you. You even have your parent, like me, sometimes being like, what is wrong with you? You're embarrassing.
Over there.
And still you're resisting. Like, wow, this is actually what I want for you when you're 16. So I think my ideas around confidence, like, really were formed, you know, as I was working with parents and writing this book. But I think the bigger thing that I really learned writing this book is when I started writing this book, I was like, I don't have a book in me. I was like, I don't have enough ideas to fill out a book. A book is so long. I was like, okay, maybe I have like a pamphlet, but like I wasn't contracted to write a pamphlet with Harper. Like they asked me to write a book. So like a pamphlet wasn't an option. And here's one of the biggest lessons in writing the book, and I think everything I've honestly done, is that when you start something, you end up learning more and generating new ideas just because you started. I couldn't have written the book all at once. It was the process of writing down thoughts, talking to people, making new relationships that led me to have the next thought that I thought was developed enough for it to put in my book. And so I just think if everyone here is thinking like there's things that hold us back, and mostly our own mindsets probably hold us back. And there's this way in which we've been told, like, you have to know, and then you do. I think knowing comes in that process of experimenting. And that's just been the most like profound and like liberating belief that's really come from writing this book.
I love that. And I love this point about confidence, because you're so, I would never have thought about it like that. Right. As a person who, of course, spends a lot of time telling my kids, why aren't you over there playing with in the birthday party? But what's interesting about it is actually when I was writing Family Firm, I wrote a lot about extracurriculars, and you sort of like think about like what are extracurriculars for, and when you sort of like dive into the data on that, actually what extracurriculars are for is confidence, right? They are not because like Harvard needs a crew, somebody to coxswain their cruise ship or whatever it is. You know, the big thing that kids get out of those experiences is some like a sense of self, a sense of like sort of social confidence outside of their you know, primary peer group. And I think that for me, that was like the sort of that moment in that book where I was like, oh, I've been thinking about this like one thing. I thought about it like it was for this, but actually, you know, I should be curating those experiences, or we should be thinking about those experiences as delivering this entirely other thing, which is, you know, self-trust, self-confidence, something like that.
Yeah, and I think about the combination of like confidence and this idea of starting before knowing it all. Like if in an extracurricular activity, your kid can like experiment with a different part of them that they don't spend a lot of time in. This is when I explore science. This is when I explore nature, soccer, whatever it is. Your kid is like actually developing confidence through the experience of like trying new things, through watching themselves find more parts of themselves in a way like, oh, I guess I'm also a kid who can do this activity. And that feels so good as a kid to realize like I don't have to be one thing. Like I can be a lot of different things.
So I want to circle back before we end and ask you again about anxiety, and particularly about kids' anxiety. This is a question people have been asking me a lot. Sort of, you know, a lot of our kids are anxious. It's actually gotten worse probably in the last couple of years. Like, how do I know if my kid is more anxiety than is like a regular amount of anxiety?
Totally. So I'm gonna upgrade question that, right? To I actually think the question that I hear a lot from parents, like, is blank normal? Whatever. Is this amount of anxiety normal? Is it normal to not crawl until you're normal to have this many tantrums at age 5? Is it right? Like, and again, like to me that's like a really question, because either my answer is yes, it's normal, and then I'm like, okay, cool, I won't think about it. Like, okay, or no, it's not normal. Oh my God, something's wrong with me. Something's wrong with my kid. Also not useful. To me, the question is something normal can always be upgraded to what is going on for my kid? What does my kid need? And what do I need to help my kid get what they need? Those three things. So I'm noticing my kid is extra hesitant. I heard the conversation between Dr. Becky and Emily Oster, and they were talking about not joining a party. Like, I hear that, but that's not it. Like, my kid won't join anything. They don't like to leave the house. Is that normal? Okay, I'm going to switch that to what's going on for my kid. Okay, my kid obviously feels like very threatened. Like, they can't access feelings of safety, right? They're really, really limited in the things that they're able to do. Okay, what does my kid need? My kid probably needs coping skills to deal with uncertainty, to deal with failure, to deal with things not going their way. What do I need to give my kid what they need? And if an answer is, I could really use another, this is what I think about for therapy, especially with kids. Like, I could really use another member of my support team. Like, I could really use someone else to partner with me and or my kid gets what they need. Then, like, yeah, then therapy is great, but not from a place of like something's wrong with my kid, but from a place of like, this is part of what my whole family system needs to give my kid what they need to develop the skills to manage the situations I keep noticing. And it, like, therapy to me in that way, in terms of seeking help, like, therapy to me is a sign of everything a family's doing right. They're open-minded. They're looking for skills. They want to get on things early. Like, that's amazing. Now, if you're thinking, I don't have therapy, does that mean I'm a horrible parent? No, like, it doesn't mean that at all. But I think that framework is really empowering for ourselves too, to notice those normal thoughts and to go to, like, what's really going on underneath the behavior? What is that a sign of in terms of unmet needs? And then what, as a parent, especially, like, what do I need to give my kid what they need? Oh, now I'm back to feeling like a good parent with a good kid who just might need some more team members for this very important, very difficult job we're doing, where we are given no training for it. It's just like, go forth, take your, like, what the hell is that? So that is the framework I will leave us with.
I love that. Yeah, I feel like we could have a whole thing on like how they just like really are very careful about checking the car seat, but then nothing else happens. They're just like, make sure you get your car seat in, right? Like, we're gonna check it 9 times, and then you're like, but you're just gonna give me the baby? It's like, well, it's in the right kind of car seat, so you're totally set.
Oh my goodness, I know. And I see this question here: what type of therapy would you recommend?
Yeah,
there are types of therapy.
Good last question.
But here's what I'll say about anxiety. I mean, in our membership, all of my workshops are there, and I really stand by every single one of them. And I think they're all kind of different from what's out there because I think our approach is different. What I would say about the anxiety workshop, both the ones for adult and kids, is so many people have said to me, they're like, this is both the polar opposite of everything I've heard from professionals, and this has been more helpful in like a week than so many other things. Because the thing with anxiety that I worry about in adult and child therapy is the ways in which we can teach kids and adults that the way to feel less anxious is to kind of like change their thoughts. And like, now we're taking on something big. I don't quite buy it, because I think what you end up doing in a deep way is you almost teach people to be more afraid of their thoughts. Like, you're like, oh, I shouldn't be having that thought. When really, in my mind, anxiety, like a good treatment for anxiety, the process of feeling more at home with yourself, noticing your thoughts, and actually in noticing them and kind of greeting them without necessarily listening to them as true, you actually make them a smaller part of yourself. And like, now, anyone listening to that should probably like, Becky, I literally have no idea what that just meant. That was like, okay. But like, our kids anxiety workshop, which is for adults, right? Because at the end of the day, also, yes, kids 100% benefit from therapy. And also, kids are with us a lot. So many times if we shift our approach with our kids, they're with us more hours of the day. And the idea of helping your kid tolerate anxiety and even tolerate uncertainty and build coping skills rather than trying to almost make things better through solving the uncertain is like a 180-degree difference in approach. And I promise you what I do in that workshop is I take those ideas and then I break it into like 10 different really actionable strategies that will make you think like, oh, I'm going to do that and that and that. And like super, super helpful. So
amazing. I noticed somebody said I need that workshop, and I agree. Awesome. Oh, this was amazing. Thank you everybody for joining us. We will put this up on, I will put this up on Instagram to figure out how to do that. Totally. And this is the book. It's called Good Inside. And when is it out, Becky? Tell us.
Okay, so it is out on the 13th, which means And ordering it,
Pre-orders are so important.
you know that
It's
they're
so important.
so
So
important.
important.
And I just want to say this because I want to own it. And I think like you too, Emily, like as women, like we're taught to like, I don't know, to like hope or like wonder. And like, I just like, I want this book to be a bestseller. And not only because that would be cool, but because like, I think it's a real communication to the world that like parenting matters. And like parenting is a job that's important and hard. I think most important and hardest. And so like parents actually deserve to get the support and resources they need. And I think it's a real communication of like, wow, look at this book on the bestsellers list. It's a communication bigger than the book. It's like parenting really matters and parents deserve support. So thank you for everyone who's already done that. And Emily, such a champion of my work. And I love you and your work.
And I love you.
We will do so many more things in the future.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day.
Bye.